Broadcasting live from Caraga State University, Kapatbaran City. This is Group 4 of BSA 1, Block A.
A pleasant day to all of us. This is Nicole Gale Uba, your host. For today's news report, our topic will be the ancient port in Egypt. For the news report, Introduction to Ancient Art in Egypt, Egyptian Civilization, Time Period, Characteristics of Ancient Egyptian Art, Religion Influence of Art, Egyptian Sculpture, and lastly, Egyptian Painting and Textiles. Introduction to Ancient Art in Egypt.
Egypt is a country located at the northern part of Africa. Their capital is Cairo. Their kings are called pharaohs. They were powerful and considered as gods. Egypt is found along the river Nile with abundance of papyrus plants along its banks. Egypt became the center of civilization around 5000 BC.
Egyptian art was influenced by several factors, including the Nile River, the two kingdoms, the Upper and the South and the Lower Nile, agriculture and hunting, animals, the heavens, the pharaohs and gods, and religious beliefs.
Egyptian art refers to the paintings, sculpture, decorative arts, and architecture produced by the Egyptians between 5000 BC and 300 BC to honor the dead or ancestor. Their arts were considered as art for eternity or funeral art. Their arts were for religious purposes.
Ancient art has no uniform and no worldwide approach. What is this? The emphasis of ancient art is in history, and it is influenced by the distinct cultures of its region, religion, and political climate.
Religion and beliefs. Egyptians were polytheists, believed and worshipped many gods such as Ra, the son of God, Osiris, god of Nile, Horus, the sky god, etc. The gods appear in the human or animal forms or combination. They believe in life after death. When a person dies, the soul continues to live in another world in the same body.
As visible religion, art communicates religious beliefs, customs, and values through iconography and depiction of the human body. The foundational principle for the interconnections between art and religion is the reciprocity between image maker and meaning maker as creative correspondence of humanity with divinity.
Art forms, paintings, sculpture, architecture, decorative arts, pottery, and literature.
Each will be discussed in other topics in next week. Stay tuned and let's learn together.
Good day everyone, I am Ria Lintakan and I am here to report about the Egypt civilization. So the ancient Egyptian civilization lasted over 3,000 years ago and one of the earliest in world history. It began around 3000 BCE when the Lower Nile River became unified under a single ruler. Additionally, Egyptian civilization developed along the Nile River in large part because the river's annual flooding ensured reliable, rich soil for growing crops, and because of that, they became a society of producers instead of hunters and gatherers. They started to build permanent homes of mud, wood, and reeds. Commerce grew, art flourished, and majestic monuments were also constructed. The prehistory of Egypt spans the period of earliest human settlement to the beginning of the early dynasty period of Egypt, beginning with King Narmer. The settled existence brought increased population in villages and towns took over villages and formed kingdoms. But long before the empire, ancient Egypt was a series of small independent city-states that bloomed along North Africa's Nile River. The city-states were divided into two regions, which are the Lower Egypt, the Delta region and the Mediterranean Sea, and the Upper Egypt, the valley in the desert, which will be discussed further by Ms. Galgo.
Continuing the previous discussion, I am Rian Eliza J. Galgo. The city-states were divided into two regions along North Africa's Nile River, which was the Upper Kingdom located in the south and the Lower Kingdom located in the north. The two regions were named according to the flow of the Nile, the Upper Egypt in the south, which was upstream, and the Lower Egypt in the north, which was downstream. However, around 3100 BC, about 5,000 years ago, a king named Narmer, in which can be seen in our presentation, united the two kingdoms, creating an empire that would last for millennia. Thus, this unification marked the official beginning of Egypt as a civilization. The unification of Upper and Lower Egypt also gave Egypt full control of the entire Nile River, and that was a key to its power. Moreover, as we can notice, the beginning of Egypt as a civilization started on that river. Thus, we can conclude how vital the Nile River is to the ancient Egypt. Without the Nile River, the existence of Egypt would have not been possible. The Nile River is located in the northeast side of Africa. Its importance to ancient Egypt civilization includes providing water to the people, provided food and resources, and land for agriculture. Consequently to nurturing agriculture, the river served as a vital transportation route wherein people mastered and become skilled to making and riding wooden boats and oars. Also, it was critical in the transportation of materials for building projects and other large-scale endeavors. Lastly, the river played a role in the construction of the pyramids. Hence, the Egypt civilization came a long way to become what it is now. From being a divided two regions to uniting as one empire was the history of this civilization. Now, moving on the reign of the civilization and the different time periods of Egypt, here to discuss is Ms. Plamos and Mr. Agoncillo.
The formation of an Egyptian empire. The first settlements of Egyptian is in the Nile Valley. It began around 700 years ago. Specifically, they occupied the entire Nile River. The first people to inhabit this region called their land Kemet, which means black land. This name comes from the rich black soil that was found there. Actually, before the ancient Egypt became an empire, it was once a series of small independent city-states, which were the Heliopolis, Memphis, Abydos, Thebes, and Niken, that bloomed along North African Nile River, which stretched as far as north as modern-day Syria and as far south as today's Sudan. The city-states divided into two regions, the Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and it was named according to the flow of the Nile. The Upper Egypt is in the south, which was upstream, or the direction toward the fluid source, and the Lower Egypt is in the north, which was downstream, or where the direction of the current flow goes. Around 500 years ago, a powerful king named Narmer from the Upper Egyptian nation led an army north in order to conquer Lower Egypt. He then established a unified Egypt. He built a capital on the border between Lower and Upper Egypt, which he named Memphis. From 5,000 years ago until around 2,300 years ago, Egypt was ruled by 30 different dynasties. The reign of the civilization can be divided into three major parts of prosperity called the Old, the Middle, and the New Kingdom, and the two periods of instability in between called the First and Second Intermediate Period. Old Kingdom. Old Kingdom started around 3100 BC, which consists of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 dynasties with 25 pharaohs. Pharaoh actually means great house, a reference to the place Pharaoh resides. Early Egyptian rulers were called king, not pharaoh, but over time, the modern time to be specific, the pharaoh as a ruler stopped. So actually the fourth and the fifth dynasties were the main Old Kingdom dynasties. And the most famous about ancient Egypt Old Kingdom is the build of the pyramid. That is why Old Kingdom is also referred to as the age of the pyramids or the age of the pyramid builder.
So the Middle Kingdom of ancient Egypt encompasses the 11th and 12th dynasties and lasted about 250 years, incorporating the rule of Pharaoh Mentuhotep II and Pharaoh Amenemhet III. During this period, the population flourished in terms of art such as jewelry making, massive construction projects, and trade. Towards the end of the Middle Kingdom, Egypt was attacked and defeated by the Hyksos people who had advanced horse-drawn chariots and bronze weapons. So basically, there is a foreign invasion and turmoil happened upon reaching the end of the Middle Kingdom. Good thing, they were able to restore their independence, but this time around, Pharaoh is still present, but the power is diminished. What is Egyptian art known for? Ancient Egyptian art reached considerable sophistication in painting and sculpture and was both highly stylized and symbolic. Much of the surviving art comes from the tombs and monuments, hence the emphasis of life after death and the preservation of knowledge of the past. As the spirit inhabited the body, the preservation of the latter against decay was also critical. The use of tightly wrapped bandages to mummify the corpse and removal and packaging of internal organs within ceramic canopic jars and other opulent sarcophagi became widespread among the ruling elite. All this arrangement helped to support a nationwide industry of Egyptian arts and craftsmen who labored to produce the artworks like painting, sculpture, pottery, ceramics, jewelry, and metal work. Egyptian sculpture was highly symbolic and for most of Egyptian history was not intended to be naturalistic or realistic. Sculptures and statues were made from clay, wood, metal, ivory, and stone, of which stone was the most permanent and plentiful. Many Egyptian sculptures were painted in vivid colors. So although within the norms of Egyptian representation, Southern Theban art at the very beginning of the Middle Kingdom displays distinct local traits, including figures with attenuated limbs and emphasized eyes and forms with a high degree of interior patterning.
Sculpture of the Middle Kingdom, Mentuhotep II, block statues and lumen patrons. Tombs of the Middle Kingdom. Shabtis were funerary figurines placed in tombs of the deceased to help them in the afterlife. Scarabs were popular amulets believed to be protectors of written products. Stelae of the Middle Kingdom. Stelae are stone slabs that served many purposes, from funerary to marking territory and to publishing decrees. The obelisk was the symbol and perceived place of existence of the sun god Ra. Architecture of the Middle Kingdom. The Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III, workers, villages, and forts.
The New Kingdom of ancient Egypt spanned from 1570 BC until 1544 BC and marked a period of great political and economic prosperity. Pharaohs conquered significant amounts of land and the Egyptian empire became large. Rulers that characterized this period included Ahmose I, Thutmose I, Hatshepsut, Amenhotep III, Akhenaten, and Ramesses II. Thutmose I was the first pharaoh to be buried in the Valley of Kings, which became the burial site of Egyptian royalty for more than 500 years. Hatshepsut was among the most successful female pharaohs in Egypt and ruled for 22 years. During the reign of the Amenhotep III, Egyptian prosperity, power, and art reached its peak and included the building of the Temple of Luxor, which still exists. Ramesses II ruled for 67 years and is believed to have built many monuments.
Architecture of the New Kingdom, temples at Karnak, Hatshepsut. Sculpture of the New Kingdom, Ramses II, Amarna art. Painting of the New Kingdom, TTS2, Amarna style painting. Characteristics of ancient Egyptian art. Ancient Egyptian art is known for its clear lines and shape. Ancient Egypt's existence spanned a long period of time, roughly from 3000 BC to 500 BC. The art produced by the culture varies slightly from period to period, but only to the expert eye. The majority of ancient Egyptian art uses the same techniques and styles across that 2,000-year span. Ancestor worship and focus on record-keeping meant Egyptian artists ritualized techniques, specifically creating places that look similar to ones made years before.
Clarity. Ancient Egyptians often combined artistic images with hieroglyphic writings, which means the result needed to remain clear to get its point across. Whether paintings or statues, the pieces always have clearly defined shapes. Balance. Egyptians were also expert mathematicians, and this understanding of fundamental balance is reflected in the composition of their art. Color plays a huge role in ancient Egyptian art. The plain stone columns and statues we see in Egypt today have the color red or white, but the bright paints covered the stone in ancient times. Perspective. While most ancient Egyptian paintings contain flat shapes, there are always a sense of perspective in the creations.
Religious influence on the art of ancient Egypt. So, according to Dagan, the art of Egypt is heavily influenced by spiritual and religious ideas and culture that extends back thousands of years. Religious beliefs largely dictated what artists created, especially the paintings that filled Egyptian temples and tombs. The influences of religion on the art of ancient Egypt are the following. The temples were decorated with paintings and filled with statues of gods and kings. In the belief of the decorated with paintings and filled with statues, in doing that, they served the gods and showed devotion to the kings and maintained the order of the universe. And next, the Egyptians wrote their history and painted images on their places' walls. In this way, they painted pictures that were symbolic to their belief systems, from the gods that they worshipped to the belief of the afterlife. And their column designs took a symbolic form to represent the vegetation of Egypt. So, the religious beliefs were fundamental basis in ancient Egypt culture, and ancient Egyptians were religious people, and their art served as hardcore proof of that. And the discussion continues further by Mr. Agoncillo, which is the Egyptian culture.
Ancient Egyptian sculpture. The ancient Egyptians made sculpture of varying sizes from a variety of materials. They made huge colossuses of rulers and small figurines that were placed in tombs that represented workers that would accompany the deceased to the afterlife. Egyptian sculpture tended made with strict parameters. Each part of the body had to be a certain size and proportion, with important features such as the shoulders and face oriented towards the viewers. Pyramids were robbed despite all the precautions taken, despite all the tripwires, traps, holes, and decapitation wires. Tomb robbing was a thriving part of the ancient Egyptian society. Tomb robbers existed in all levels of society, from royalty to serf. Many in the lower classes viewed the tombs and mummies of the upper classes as ostentation. They resented that the upper classes could afford to bury a fantastic amount of treasure with them. Thus, the lower classes would rob the tombs in order to provide for their family. Pharaoh's body were sometimes mutilated. The Great Sphinx is from 2558 to 2532 BCE. Materials used were limestones. Its type is in the round carved, and its purpose is monumental sculpture to show off the pharaoh. 4th Dynasty Pharaoh's Khafre's head placed on the body of a sleeping lion, which is a mystical beast with the head of a man and the body of a lion. And it symbolizes a pharaoh as an incarnation of the sun god Ra. Minkaura and the Queen is from 2500 BCE. Material used was grey wackel. Its type is a high relief carved. Purpose, propaganda sculpture to show legacy of Pharaoh. Many burial tombs had statues honoring pharaohs. The pharaoh would actually commission somebody to sculpt and create life-size statues to continue their legacy. This sculpture was commissioned by the pharaoh Minkura, in which he is standing on an Egyptian postiff, blocky, motionless with one foot forward. Pharaoh Akhenaten, formerly known as Amenhotep. He changed his name Amenhotep, Amen, which is the important god in the new kingdom. He felt that Aten, in the sun disk god, was the most important god, so he changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, one who worships the Aten. He founded a new religion, which is monotheistic, honoring one god, which is Aten, sun disk god. He then founded a new capital called Tel Amarna, the new city of Aten, which is dedicated only to Aten. He then developed a new style of art, which is Amarna art. Amarna art is a royal poses with elongated neck and head and other exaggerated features. Portrait of Khafra. Khafra enthroned is the most important and iconic surviving sculptures from ancient Egypt. It depicts the 4th dynasty. Pharaoh Khafra, slightly larger than life and seated upon a lion-pole throne. His body is rigid and attentive, but the head is more lifelike. The sides of the throne are decorated with the Semitawi hieroglyph, meant to represent the king's duty to literally bind the constituents part of Egypt together under one authority. His right hand forms a fist which must have held a symbol of his high office. Khafra depicted with two kinds of divine protection. He wears the Nemes headdress with a cobra, representing Wadjet, the protection goddess of Lower Egypt. A falcon extends its wings to embrace the back of the king's headdress, emblematic of the god Horus, another protective deity, often directly associated with the living king, whose cult centered in the Upper Egypt.
Moving on to the ancient Egyptian paintings. As we know, paintings are seen to be artistically creative that are usually seen now in museums, malls, and even in our home. However, in ancient Egypt, paintings are mostly unique and has its own characteristics. One of the characteristics of Egyptian paintings is the use of color, which was also regulated and was used symbolically. Egyptian artists used 6 colors in their paintings: red, green, blue, yellow, white, and black. Red, being the color of power, symbolized life and victory, as well as anger and fire. Green symbolized new life, growth, and fertility, while blue symbolized creation and rebirth, and yellow symbolized the eternal, such as the qualities of sun and gold. White was the color of purity, symbolizing all things sacred, and was typically used in religious objects and tools used by the priest. Lastly, black was the color of death and represented the underworld and the night. In addition, not like any typical paintings, Egyptian paintings commonly made use of canon of proportion, which was the sizes of figures that were calculated purely by reference to the person's social status, rather than by the normal artistic rules of linear perspective. Also, most artwork paintings involves depiction of gods and goddesses. That is famous in Egyptian culture. Lastly, most Egyptian painting has its symbolic meanings. Now, here are some examples of famous paintings in ancient Egypt. First is the King with Isis Tomb of Haremhab by the artist named Lancelot Crane during the original New Kingdom 1323 to 1295 BC. Second is the Stela of the sculptor Ken worshipping Amenhotep during the New Kingdom 1279 to 1213 BC. Third is a painting of an artist named Norman de Harris Davis entitled Userhat kneeling before Osiris and the goddess of the west, Tomb of Userhat. Fourth example is a painting called Nani before Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys during the third immediate period 1050 BC. One examples where paintings are commonly seen and known in ancient Egypt are in tomb walls. Tombs are the monumental location wherein dead people are placed during the early Egypt. The most elaborate tombs in ancient times were those built by the Egyptians after for their kings, the pharaohs, in which the Egyptians called it mastobas. Tombs are made of dried bricks which were then used to shore up shafts and chambers dug into the earth. Hence, tombs are seen to be significantly important to Egyptians in the early period. Also, it provides us with invaluable information about the lives of the ancient Egyptians. In ancient Egypt, the tomb walls of the rich and powerful were often filled with paintings. These paintings were there to help the person in the afterlife. They often depicted the person buried passing into the afterlife, and they would show scenes of this person happy in the afterlife. Egyptians believed that some of the images, paintings, or carvings that they created in tombs would come to life and accompany the mummified deceased into the afterlife. They believed that tomb wall paintings may serve as a way to connect the dead and the living. Furthermore, the purpose of tomb paintings was to create a pleasant afterlife for the dead person, with themes such as journeying through the afterworld or deities providing protection. Thus, ancient Egyptian paintings are seen to be relevant to the Egyptian people because of how it consists of different symbolic meanings. Also, many ancient Egyptian paintings are mostly seen in tombs and have survived in tombs and sometimes temples, due to Egypt's extremely dry climate. We can conclude that Egyptian paintings in the early periods are mostly unique compared to the paintings of today's generation.
And that concludes to our report. See you next time.
Broadcasting live from Caraga State University, Kapatbaran City. This is Group 4 of BSA 1, Block A.